The phone rang at 8:47 in the morning, and I almost didn't answer it. I was still in my wedding dress. Well, technically I'd slept in it, which tells you everything you need to know about the state I was in after the reception. My new husband, Daniel, was passed out cold next to me, one arm draped over his eyes, still smelling like champagne and the cedar cologne I'd bought him specifically for our wedding day. The room was golden and warm. Flower petals from the centerpiece we'd stolen off the banquet table were scattered across the hotel comforter. My feet ached from dancing. My cheeks hurt from smiling. I was the happiest I had ever been in my entire life. And then my phone buzzed against the nightstand and the screen read, "Associates." I stared at it for a second, confused. It was a Saturday. What clinic calls on a Saturday? I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something, I still can't explain what, made me slide off the bed as quietly as I could, tiptoe into the marble bathroom, and close the door behind me before I answered. "Hello, is this Ashley Mercer?" The voice was male, professional, careful, too careful. The kind of careful that makes your stomach drop before a single word of substance has been spoken. "It's Ashley Calloway now, actually," I said, and I remember smiling when I said it because the name was brand new and I loved the way it felt in my mouth. "I got married last night." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Congratulations," the doctor said, and then, "Miss Calloway, I need you to come in today as soon as possible." Another pause, and then his voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper, like he was worried someone might overhear him through the phone. "We found something in your results, something that requires your immediate attention, and I need you to come alone." He paused one final time. "Please don't mention this call to your husband. Not yet. Don't say a single word to him." I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, still in my dress, mascara smudged under both eyes, hair half up, half collapsed. The woman looking back at me did not look like someone whose life was about to change. But that's always how it goes, isn't it? The earthquake doesn't warn you. The ground just opens up. I said, "I'll be there in an hour." I need to back up, though, because to understand what that phone call meant, what it really meant under the surface, you need to understand who I was before it, who Daniel was, what we were together, and why I thought we were untouchable. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, which is the kind of suburb where the HOA sends you a letter if your lawn isn't the right shade of green, and every third house has a minivan in the driveway and a college pennant nailed above the garage. My parents were both teachers. We weren't struggling, but we weren't comfortable either. We were solidly, precisely middle class, which meant I understood from a very young age that security was something you built, not something that got handed to you. My mom clipped coupons. My dad drove the same Ford Taurus for 14 years. I got a partial scholarship to University of Illinois and waitressed my way through the rest of my tuition. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that nothing about my life was handed to me. Every single thing I had, I earned. By the time I was 29, I had a marketing manager position at a mid-sized logistics company in downtown Chicago, a one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park that I'd furnished entirely from a combination of IKEA and Facebook Marketplace finds, a 401k that I contributed to religiously, and a credit score of 748. I had two best friends, my college roommate Jenna, who lived in Wicker Park and made ceramics on weekends, and my work friend Priya, who was sharp and funny, and always the first person I called when something went wrong. I had a routine that I loved. Tuesday spin class, Thursday takeout from the Thai place on Fullerton, Sunday FaceTime with my mom while I prepped meals for the week. I was not looking for Daniel when I found him. That part is important. It was a company happy hour at a rooftop bar in River North, one of those mandatory fun events that everyone complains about going to and then ends up staying at until midnight. Daniel worked for a software company that shared our office building. He was tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered in a way that looked effortless rather than gym-obsessed. He was standing near the bar, looking mildly uncomfortable, holding a beer he wasn't drinking, clearly also having been dragged there against his will. I walked up next to him to order a glass of wine, and he looked at me and said, "Is it too early to fake a family emergency?" I laughed, actually laughed, not the polite version. "My fake emergency involves a gas leak," I said. "What's yours?" "Sick dog," he said immediately. "I don't even have a dog, but I feel like that's more sympathetic." We stayed until midnight. His name was Daniel Calloway. He was 32, originally from Columbus, Ohio, had moved to Chicago for work 4 years prior, and had a quiet, steady quality about him that I found deeply attractive in a way I hadn't been attracted to anyone in a long time. Not flashy, not trying too hard. He opened doors, but not in a performative way. He remembered things, small things, the kind that matter. On our third date, he brought me a book by an author I'd mentioned once in passing 3 weeks earlier. I remember holding it in my hands and thinking, this man actually listens. We dated for 2 years. They were good years, genuinely, unperformatively good. We traveled together. A long weekend in New Orleans, a week in Portugal that we'd saved up for together, a road trip to visit his parents in Columbus, where his mother Karen made her famous pot roast. And his dad Gary showed me his woodworking shop in the garage with the quiet pride of a man showing you something sacred. Daniel and I had disagreements, sure, but they were the normal kind, about whose turn it was to pick the restaurant, about whether his habit of leaving cabinet doors open was a personality flaw or a minor quirk, about how often to visit his family versus mine. Nothing that felt like a crack, nothing that made me lie awake at night. He proposed on a Tuesday, not a special Tuesday, not an anniversary or a birthday, just a regular Tuesday in November after we'd ordered pizza and were watching something forgettable on TV. He turned to me during a commercial break, and he had the ring in his hand, and he said, "I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, and I just realized there's no right moment. There's just right person, and you're it. So, will you?" I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got engaged in November and set the wedding for the following October. 12 months of planning. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer, the whole production. We got married at a beautiful old estate in Geneva, Illinois, 40 minutes outside the city on the most perfect Saturday in October that Illinois has ever produced. 72 degrees, not a cloud. The oak trees at full peak color, all copper and red and gold. 83 guests. My college roommate Jenna as maid of honor. His college roommate Brandon as best man. And because we were both practical, responsible adults who loved each other and wanted to start our marriage with full transparency, we had both gotten full STI screenings at a private clinic about 6 weeks before the wedding. It was my idea. I'd read something about it, about how it was becoming more common for couples to do before marriage, and Daniel had agreed without hesitation. He'd actually said, "That's smart, Ash. Let's do it." We'd gone together on a Thursday afternoon, hand in hand, like the responsible grown-ups we were trying to be. Both sets of results had come back clean. We knew that. We'd seen the paperwork. So, when the doctor called the morning after our wedding and said they'd found something strange, something that required my immediate and private attention, I did not understand. My mind could not assemble the pieces into a picture that made sense. Clean results, both of us, 6 weeks ago. What could have possibly changed? I stood in that hotel bathroom in my wedding dress, heart pounding, trying to breathe slowly, trying to be logical. Maybe it was an administrative error, a mislabeled sample that happened, right? These things happened. It was probably nothing. It was almost certainly nothing. I would go in, and Dr. Marsh would apologize for the confusion, and I would go back to the hotel and wake Daniel up, and we would laugh about it over room service. I told myself that the whole drive over, The clinic was nearly empty on a Saturday morning. A receptionist I didn't recognize buzzed me through with a sympathetic half-smile that I didn't like. Dr. Marsh met me in his office rather than an exam room, which also felt wrong. He was a trim, 50-ish man with wire-framed glasses and a very deliberate way of speaking. The kind of doctor who chooses every word carefully because he's learned what happens when you don't. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said. "Please sit down." I sat. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt I'd grabbed from my bag, my hair pulled back, no makeup. I probably looked like I'd slept in my wedding dress because I had. "What's going on?" I asked. I was proud of how steady my voice sounded. He opened a folder on his desk and slid a single sheet across to me. Lab results, my name at the top. And then his eyes met mine over the rims of his glasses, and he said something that knocked every organized thought right out of my head. "The sample labeled with your husband's name," he said quietly, "does not match the DNA profile we have on file for him from his initial intake paperwork." I stared at him. "The sample that was submitted under Daniel Calloway's name," he continued carefully, "was not provided by Daniel Calloway." The room was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang twice and stopped. I could hear the air conditioning. I could hear my own heartbeat. "What does that mean?" I asked, even though some part of me, the part that had been quietly, inexplicably terrified since the phone rang that morning, already knew exactly what it meant. Dr. Marsh folded his hands on the desk. "It means someone else took that test in your husband's place." I sat with that sentence for what felt like a very long time. The air conditioning hummed. Dr. Marsh didn't move. I became aware of my own hands in my lap, the way my fingers had gone completely still, like my body had already processed something my brain was still refusing to accept. "Someone else," I repeated, "took the test in Daniel's place. That is what the DNA comparison indicates." "Yes." He kept his voice even, clinical, kind. "When a patient registers with our practice, we collect a baseline DNA profile as part of our intake protocol. It's a fraud prevention measure we implemented 2 years ago. When your husband's STI panel came back, our lab tech ran a routine confirmation and found that the DNA in the submitted sample did not match the profile in our system under Daniel Calloway's name. The discrepancy was flagged immediately. So, the results," I said slowly, "the clean results, those weren't his." "Correct. We have no actual test results for your husband." I stood up. I don't remember deciding to stand. My body just did it. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into a minivan. A kid on a bike was cutting across the lot. Saturday morning in the suburbs, everything normal. Everything completely obscenely normal. "Who?" I asked the window. "Do you know who the sample belongs to?" "We don't have that person in our system." Dr. Marsh said it's an unknown profile. "What we do know is that whoever submitted that sample came in during the appointment window, registered under your husband's name with your husband's insurance card and intake form." I turned around. He gave someone his information, his insurance card, his appointment slot. My voice was very flat. He sent someone else in to take his test. Dr. Marsh looked at me with the careful, practiced compassion of a man who had delivered terrible news before and knew there was no cushioning it. "That is the most likely explanation." "Yes." I drove back to the hotel in a state that I can only describe as pressurized silence. I wasn't crying. I wasn't panicking. I was thinking with this horrible, cold precision that I had never experienced before, like something in me had clicked over into a different mode entirely. By the time I pulled into the parking garage, I had a plan. Not a big plan, just the next 3 steps. That was all I could manage. Step 1, don't let Daniel see my face until I knew more. Step 2, call Priya. Step 3, don't do anything irreversible until I had the full picture. Daniel was awake when I got back to the room. He was sitting up in bed in the hotel robe, scrolling his phone, and he looked up when I walked in with the easy, warm smile of a man who had no idea his world was about to collapse. "Hey, you," he said. "Where'd you go? I was going to order room service." "Needed some air," I said. "Went for a drive." I kissed him on the top of the head because I knew if I kissed him on the mouth, I would fall apart. "Order whatever you want. I'm going to shower." I stood in the shower for 20 minutes with the water as hot as I could stand it. And I thought about Brandon. Brandon Hole, Daniel's college roommate, his best man. The man who had stood at the altar 12 hours earlier with a benaire on his lapel and tears in his eyes during our vows. I thought about the way Daniel had talked about Brandon over the years, how they'd been inseparable at Ohio State, how Brandon had been going through some stuff lately, how Daniel always seemed to find reasons to defend him when I'd occasionally raised an eyebrow at one thing or another. I thought about the fact that Brandon was the only person Daniel trusted completely and without question. And I thought about something Daniel had said casually about 3 months before the wedding, something I'd filed away and forgotten until right now. He'd said, "Brandon's been dealing with some health anxiety stuff. I think he's worried about getting tested for something, but he's embarrassed about it." I stood very still under the hot water. Daniel hadn't sent a stranger to take his test. He'd sent Brandon. I called Priya from the bathroom while Daniel watched football in the other room. I had the shower running again for cover. I told her everything in a rapid, quiet whisper, and when I finished, there was a 3-second silence on the other end. "Ashley," she said, "listen to me. Do not confront him yet. You need more information. You need to know why he did this before you blow everything up, because the why matters. It changes everything." "What why could possibly make this okay?" I said. "None," she said. "I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying you need to know if this is about him hiding a disease or hiding something else. Those are two very different problems." She was right. She was always right, which was why she was the first person I called. I spent the rest of that weekend performing the most exhausting role of my life. I smiled at brunch with Daniel's parents. I laughed at Gary's jokes. I let Karen squeeze my hands and tell me how happy she was to finally have a daughter. I watched Daniel across every table and every room, and I tried to reconcile the man I was looking at with what I now knew, and the gap between those two things was so large and so dark that I kept having to look away. We got home Sunday evening. Monday morning, Daniel went to work. I called in sick, sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and my phone, and I got to work. The first call I made was to a family law attorney named Rebecca Sodto, whose name Priya had given me, just to understand your options, not to file anything yet. Rebecca was brisk, organized, and deeply unsurprised by anything I told her. She told me what my rights were, what documentation I should start gathering, and what I should absolutely not do, which included confronting Daniel without witnesses or evidence. The second thing I did was go back through 2 years of small, quiet memories and hold each one up to the light. The trips where Daniel had been stressed about work, the nights he'd slept on his phone, the way he'd pushed back just slightly when I'd first suggested the clinic screenings and then agreed so quickly and cheerfully that I'd thought nothing of it. The fact that he'd gone to his appointment alone on a different day than me because his schedule didn't line up. I had thought that was completely normal. I had not questioned it for one single second. I texted Brandon on Tuesday, casual, friendly, just a quick note saying it had been such a beautiful wedding and that Daniel and I were so grateful he'd been there. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before he responded. "So happy for you both. It was perfect." And then after a pause, "You both deserve every good thing." I stared at that last line for a long time. I hired a private investigator on Wednesday. Her name was Linda Garza, and she came recommended by Rebecca Sodto, and she sat across from me at a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue and listened to everything I said without blinking. I gave her what I had. She told me what she could find out and what it would cost, and I agreed without hesitating because my credit score was 748 and I had a 401k and I had earned every single thing I had. And I was not going to let someone take it from me without understanding exactly what I was dealing with. Linda came back to me in 8 days. 8 days during which I cooked dinner, watched TV, slept next to my husband, and said I love you every morning like a woman who was not quietly dismantling her own life. 8 days during which I got very, very good at performing normally. She came back with photographs, phone records, and a name. The name was Karen Adler. She was 30 years old, lived in Wicker Park, and had been seeing Daniel for 14 months. 14 months. Our engagement had been 12. The math on that sat in my chest like a stone. Linda had phone records showing a pattern of contact, texts, calls, the occasional disappearance from Daniel's location data that aligned with gaps in his calendar that he'd always explained as late meetings or drinks with clients. The health thing clicked into place with a horrible clarity. Daniel had been sleeping with someone else during our engagement. He'd been worried about what a real STI test might show. So he'd called in his best friend, his most loyal, most embarrassing about health, Brandon, and sent him in as a substitute. Clean results, no awkward conversations, wedding proceeds as planned. He had gambled my health on a lie. That was the part I kept coming back to. Not just the cheating, not just the deception. He had made a choice that put my physical health at risk. And he had made it without a second thought, because he was more afraid of getting caught than he was concerned about protecting me. I called Priya, then I called Jenna, then I called my mom, which was the hardest call because she had loved Daniel, and I had to listen to her voice break. Then I called Rebecca Sawdoe and told her I was ready. I chose a Sunday, our 1-month anniversary, as it happened. Daniel had made reservations at the Italian place in River North, where we'd had our first real date, and I let him keep them, and I let him drive us there, and I let him order the wine, and I waited until the bread came. "I need to tell you something," I said. He looked up. He had that easy smile, the one I had fallen in love with, and something in it flickered when he saw my face. "Ash, you okay?" "I went back to Riverside Private Health Associates," I said. "The clinic. The morning after our wedding, they called me. Did you know they run a DNA verification on submitted samples?" I watched his face, watched the color change. "Your sample didn't match, Daniel. The man who came in under your name wasn't you. It was Brandon." The bread sat between us, untouched. The restaurant was warm and full, and the couple at the next table was laughing about something, and Daniel's face had gone the color of the white tablecloth. "I don't," he started. "I also know about Karen Adler," I said. My voice was completely steady. I had rehearsed this. I had rehearsed it 40 times in the shower and another 20 in my car. 14 months, Wicker Park. I have phone records and photographs. I have everything, Daniel. He opened his mouth and closed it. He looked like a man who had run out of exits and was only now realizing the room had no doors. "I need you to understand something," I continued. "You didn't just cheat on me. You sent your friend to take a medical test in your place because you were afraid of what it would show. You put my health at risk. You let me stand at that altar and say vows in front of 83 people. And you knew the whole time." "Ashley," his voice cracked. He reached across the table and I moved my hands into my lap. "Don't." I said it quietly without heat. "Just a fact. My attorney's name is Rebecca Stowe. She'll be in touch with yours this week. The marriage is 12 days old, Daniel. There's not much to untangle legally, but I have everything documented, and if you make this difficult, I will not be quiet about why." He said, "I love you." He said it like a man drowning, reaching for anything solid. "I know you think you do," I said, "but you love yourself more. You proved that." I put my napkin on the table, picked up my purse, and walked out of the restaurant. Priya was parked half a block away, engine running, exactly where she'd said she'd be. I got in the passenger seat, and she didn't say anything. She just handed me a bottle of water and started driving. And I sat there watching the lights of the city blur past the window, and I let myself cry for exactly 20 minutes because I had decided in advance that 20 minutes was all I was going to give it that night. The annulment was granted 4 months later on the grounds of fraud. Rebecca Sodto was extraordinary because the marriage was so new and Daniel did not contest it. He was, I think, too ashamed and too aware of what I could have made public. The process was cleaner than it had any right to be. I got my name back, Ashley Mercer, again, all the way down. Brandon called me once about 2 weeks after that dinner. He was crying. He said he hadn't known what Daniel was doing, that Daniel had told him the test was just a formality, and he'd been nervous about needles, and that he'd had no idea about Karen. None. I believed about 60% of that. I told him I didn't blame him for being a loyal friend, but that loyalty to the wrong person in the wrong moment still had consequences, and that he'd have to live with that. He said he knew. I wished him well, and I never spoke to him again. Daniel and Karen apparently stayed together for about 7 months after everything fell apart. Priya's friend, who lived in Wicker Park, saw them at a farmer's market once and then stopped seeing them. And eventually the story went quiet, the way those stories always do. I got my own STI screening done, a real one, thorough, with Dr. Marsh, who was genuinely kind about the whole thing. I came back clean. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Riverside Private Health Associates, and I cried again, this time from pure, uncomplicated relief. I moved into a new apartment in Lincoln Park. Different building, different block. I bought a couch I'd been looking at for 2 years and hadn't let myself get because Daniel thought it was too expensive. It cost $1,400, and it is the most comfortable thing I have ever owned. I joined a new spin class on Tuesdays. I started cooking again on Sundays, while I FaceTimed my mom, who had stopped crying about Daniel after about 6 weeks, and started saying things like, "You know, I always thought his cabinet door thing was a red flag. I am not going to tell you that I came out the other side of this completely fine. I didn't. I spent months second-guessing my own judgment, lying awake at 3 a.m., running back through 2 years of memories and searching for the moments I should have seen. The thing about a person who is very good at lying is that they are very good at lying. There is no magic thing you missed, no obvious sign you failed to notice. Sometimes people are just deceptive, and the only thing you can do when you discover it is decide what happens next. What I decided was this. I was not going to let one person's cowardice become the defining story of my life. I had built everything I had from scratch. I could do it again. I was, after all, a woman who knew how to earn things. My credit score is now 771. My 401k is in better shape than it's ever been. I still have the same 2 best friends. I still get Thai food on Thursdays from the place on Fullerton. And sometimes when the light in my apartment is golden and warm, and my couch is impossibly comfortable, and I am exactly precisely where I am supposed to be, I think about the morning after my wedding, the mascara, the wedding dress, the marble bathroom, the phone ringing on a Saturday, and I think about how close I came to never knowing. Some things that feel like the end are actually just the ground clearing. If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth about boundaries today.